presents. From the team that brought you Angels Awakening. After 100 years, Henry Hatcher is awoken to fight his mortal enemy. But he is not alone. Guardian Angel.
Good evening, everybody.
Hello, hello.
Welcome to an. Oh, sorry.
I was just gonna say, every time I see that trailer, I think to myself, Bogdan has such an eye for horror.
Yes, he does.
The way he makes the elementals look is just.
Yeah. They're creepy. Yeah, and creepy and cool. Yeah.
Let's see. Let's try to rearrange this a bit. That's more centered.
Yes. But welcome to another episode of Critique Corner with me, Daniel Parker,
and me, DB Fastbinder.
And of course, if you are returning, welcome back. If you're new, what we usually do is we do some reviews. We talk about something new, something classic or older. Usually we talk box office, but we kind of did that on Sunday, and those are the same numbers from Sunday that are today. So no real.
Right. We could talk about those numbers again.
Yeah.
We can go into minutia about Wednesday, but I don't think anybody would care about that.
Yeah. But yeah. So we're forgoing that. But before we get into our reviews, we do have some sad news that we need to talk about. Just heard kind of breaking news. But we lost a comedy legend with Bob Newhart. Passed away today at the age of 94. For people like me and a few others, like Bob Newhart was just like I said, a comedy legend. He had a very kind of unique style of humor. Like it was very kind of he had that deadpan delivery, and he would always tell these always these like one-sided stories.
Right, he would pretend to be on the phone with somebody having one half of a conversation.
Yeah. And my favorite bit was the one where I think it was like a bus driver training, and one part he's like, "Okay, now you see how the old lady is spinning around in the aisle right now."
Yeah. Right. Okay, now you got the woman with the armful of groceries, and you're going to slow down just a little bit to give her some hope that you're going to stop to pick her up, and then that's when you hit the accelerator.
Yeah. And good to see you as always, Ninja.
Yeah. I think my favorite bit is the one where he's talking about bomb defusal, and he says, you always see it in the media as like this elite team. What happens if it's not the elite team? And he had the guy giving the remote instructions to the guy out there with this torpedo that's washed ashore. He's like, hey, calm down, Phil. I mean, if this thing goes off, it's not going to be you they talk to.
Yeah.
He also had a storied career in movies and television.
Yeah.
I'm weird in that I never really watched his sitcoms much. I was more of a fan of the comedy albums, which supposedly, and I don't know. So I actually listened to an audiobook biography of his a while back, and he said that at one point his albums had sold better than any Beatles album. But the thing is that the numbers were reportedly lost in a fire, so he doesn't have an exact number. And he said he also didn't know about like how well they were still selling in the present, or how, if all the records were gone, anybody knew what to pay him. But he still got occasional checks for his various comedy albums. And I think he mentioned he got one for like 35 cents the week he had been recording the audiobook.
Yeah. Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me. Comedy albums usually are sold very well. I think like Bill Cosby was like at the top for a long time. Not anymore, of course, but
Right.
that's another story. But
Yes. Yeah. I also learned that the great injustice that Bob only ever won one Emmy, and it was for a minor recurring character who he would play on Big Bang Theory, uh, who was basically a Mr. Wizard type science educator who was apparently the inspiration for Sheldon to get into science.
uh,
I think
yeah.
I caught one of the episodes, and yeah, he basically had the right amount of disdain and irritation with Sheldon.
Well, that's fitting. But yeah, I mean, I've watched like a little bit of his sitcoms. There was one on the Bob Newhart show when his neighbor, I can't remember his name, but he was an orthodontist, and he retires, and then like one day he sees his neighbor, and he's just whittling at a stick, and so he's like, "Oh, what are you doing there, whittling? What are you whittling? Stick." He said, "Wow, you've been retired for 2 days and you're already senile."
Yeah, but Bob, you shall be missed. But
Yeah,
you left behind a great legacy of comedy, and I would say that Bob's style is oddly contemporary, because when you think about it, pitch meeting is basically just that, but you're hearing both sides of the conversation.
yeah,
And for that matter, a lot of like things I see as like TikTok memes or whatever, where people are just having these conversations, are kind of in his style.
yeah. They are. Yeah, they talk to each other back and forth. Yeah, with yeah,
So your legacy lives on, and if you haven't checked him out, he's worth a listen. You can probably pull him up on Spotify or whatnot.
yeah,
Uh,
and yeah,
Back
you
in the
could.
day, I actually bought CDs.
Yes, yeah. I think we had my family. We had some of his CDs. Yeah, and you could, and if you want, I'm sure you can find episodes of either Bob Newhart or Newhart on either, probably on, might be, on some streaming service somewhere, but probably
Let's
Tubi
hear,
or
what network was he on?
uh,
If it was CBS, it's probably Paramount Plus.
yeah,
If he was on a NBC, I think that's going to be, what do you call it?
Peacock,
Peacock. Yeah.
Peacock, yeah, and ABC would probably be Hulu. Yeah.
Yep.
But yeah, yeah, you will be missed, Bob. Yeah,
Yep. I guess we'll just have to imagine a world without Bob Newhart.
yeah,
Speaking of imagining things,
yes,
if
if yes. So yeah, we actually have a really new movie this week for our new movie review.
yeah, last week we had the shortest spread between new and old reviews of 4 years.
Yeah,
This week we have a more proper 30-year gap.
yes, yeah. So yeah, we gave a watch for with If, which is now on Paramount Plus. Um, and it this is it's based on a children's book series, if I'm
Is
not
it?
mistaken. Is it? I can't remember.
Um, well, I know that, so there was a very similar cartoon on Cartoon Network about 15, 20 years ago at this point, called
Okay.
Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends. And I'm just going to get this out of the way right now. I refuse to believe that anybody involved with this movie was not aware of that show.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
in part because, well, Steve Carell's big purple guy is named Blue,
Yeah.
and there was also the main imaginary friend in that show, different looking guy, but his name was also Blue. Although he was
Mm,
actually blue rather than being purple, but
yeah. Yeah.
uh,
Okay.
it's weirdly coincidental.
Yeah. So it's either either a reboot or remake or a total ripoff.
And since that's the only like direct thing that's the same, I
Yeah.
think we're gonna have to put it more in the category of heavily inspired. Is the
Heavily
most I'm
inspired.
willing. That's the most I'm willing to say without
Okay.
any
Yeah.
without more direct evidence. But
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
uh, some Daniel's usually in charge of coming up with the titles for these reviews, but I almost want this one to be "If is for sad children, and that's okay."
Yeah. Pretty much. Yeah. 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 So if follows our main character. Her name is B. Um, and yeah, the opening credits, you get kind of a little montage of her early life, which is you know, she and her parents having all kinds of fun together and everything, but then her mom gets the big C and passes away. And then the movie picks up where she's at her grandmother's apartment, which uh, I don't know what she did for a living or what her late husband might have done for a living, but probably had a very good job if they could afford a place like that in, in in New York and Brooklyn.
I'm going to go with the theory that she's one of those people who got a really like basically rent control at some point.
Uh, yeah.
So she's probably been able to live at basically the same cost for 30 odd years.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Uh, but yeah, so Bee's with her grandmother, and that's because her dad, who's played by John Krasinski, who's also the writer and director of the movie, he's in the hospital because he's got to have heart surgery. And so she's got all this going on, and then she starts seeing odd people around her apartment.
Yep. And to answer Holy Ninja's question, because I brought up the reference to Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, no. It's just a weird coincidence to have a character named Blue who is like the poster child for this movie when there was also a character named Blue in the other one.
Yeah.
Yes. So B starts to see people, and uh, she eventually stumbles upon. It's a strange setup, and they don't
Yeah.
really. I feel like there's some mechanical things that you would have to wonder about with this whole imaginary friends thing. Which I'll be honest here, like that's true of a lot of children's media. Where if you start to really pick it apart, it's like, wait, how does this work? Like, if I just have a passing fancy, do I generate an imaginary friend? Does
Yeah.
everybody in this world have an imaginary friend, or just some people?
Yeah. Yeah, the rules for the universe, for this whole thing, the universe, and with what you were just saying, aren't really clearly established. Yeah, so it's not really yeah, well, not that well thought out. And but yeah, so B meets Calvin, who's played by Ryan Reynolds, and if it's for some reason both of them can see all of these imaginary friends, ifs. And so the two ifs that we meet are, like I said, Blue, who's voiced by Steve Carell, and then Blossom, I think, is the other one, who's voiced by Phoebe Waller-Bridge. And they basically, B finds out that all of these imaginary friends are they were created by people when they were kids, but then when they got older and they couldn't see them anymore. So now they're just kind of floating out there, and then they all end up in basically a retirement home for imaginary friends, and they're trying to figure out, like, what to do with, where should they all go, basically.
Right? What do we do with ourselves?
Yeah.
And yeah, that is. I'm just going to go ahead and pull this up here.
Yeah.
So that is Phoebe Waller-Bridge's character, and this is the character Blue. Just taking a
Who
moment.
isn't really blue, he's purple.
Which is a joke. Yeah, it's like your name is Blue, or my name is Blue, but you're purple. My kid was colorblind.
Yeah.
um, so I was actually kind of aware of these two characters well in advance because Baskin and Robbins, when this came out, had a promotion for a couple of months where they had flavor based on the movie.
Mm.
It wasn't very good. I tried it out. It was like this Oreo stuff that was also like, was it berry flavored? It was blue. I know it was blue. I forget why it was blue.
Probably blueberry. Yeah.
Maybe bubble gum.
Yeah.
It was strange. I couldn't recommend it, but I remember as soon as I saw this Betty Boop style character here, I was intrigued just because it's like I like things like Cuphead that pay homage to the very early generation of animated characters.
Yeah.
Um, while we've had issues with Phoebe Waller-Bridge in the past in her
Mhm.
association with Lucasfilm, uh, I thought she did a fine job here. I was a little surprising to hear a kind of sultry British voice coming out of a Betty Boop style character. I'll
Yeah.
admit, I actually was like in the initial scenes where she's kind of skirting at the edges of the camera, and you don't hear her voice too clearly. I was thinking, is is she voiced by a man? No, no, she was
Yeah.
not. But I had the thought because you couldn't get a clear listen to her.
Yeah. 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 You're kind of expecting her something like boop boop be do. Yeah.
Do. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So to get back to the movie itself, so I'd say that from a presentation perspective, all of the ifs they have a variety of interesting designs.
Mhm.
And I was thinking to myself that they seemed a little bit generic, but then I realized that does kind of actually fit
Mhm.
a bunch of things that a kid would think up.
Yeah. Yeah. They are very. Yeah. Yeah. They're kind of like basically like something a kid would draw on the like when they're they're drawing stuff with their crayons. Yeah.
Right, when they're first learning how to draw,
Yeah.
they actually have a kind of amusing bit with the ice Bradley Cooper, who's like very bitter about how he was imagined because his kid lived in Arizona and he was just thirsty, and that was the entirety of his character design.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the overall character arc of the movie is B, when her mom died, basically shut herself off from the world of imagination and was kind of forced to grow up very quickly.
Yeah.
Now, her dad is still a goofball and is constantly trying to, you know, draw that kiddishness out of her, but she just keeps shutting him down all the time.
Right. Yeah. And yeah, and so yeah, she's always kind of so at first, when she starts seeing this stuff, it's kind of like, okay, this doesn't make any sense. But then, and then I can't remember what the catalyst was for her to like actually help these help the imaginary friends out. It was
Yeah, what was it? I mean, I guess besides getting to actually know them,
yeah.
but I don't know. One thing is that her imagination, like she's special because she can see all the imaginary friends, but also her imagination allows her to upgrade their retirement home, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, and yeah, so she basically has this like untapped power that she's able to tap back into. Yeah. Um and one of the other ifs that I kind of wanted to mention real quick was the one who the if who's running uh the retirement community, which I don't see him
Oh,
in there.
yeah, the old bear.
The old bear, yeah. um, Lewis, who is was voiced by Louis Gossett Jr., who it was actually his last movie.
Yeah, he died in March, and so the movie was dedicated to him when it came out.
Yeah. So yeah, I just thought I'd make that a little mention there. He kind of looked like like you would expect like an old kind of teddy bear to look. And yeah,
Yeah.
this guy's
Oh,
probably our favorite.
here's the old teddy bear in
Yeah.
actual toy form.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was our favorite character here. Just a very high energy wannabe detective. It's like a kid friendly, cartoonish version of the Question from DC Comics, almost.
Yeah.
Not a conspiracy theorist, but just like very insistent on sneaking around and trying to solve mysteries and things like that.
Right. Yeah.
Doesn't get a lot of screen time, unfortunately.
No, he didn't. And he's voiced by Christopher Maloney, who most people remember from Law and Order SVU. He was also the lead military guy in Man of Steel. Um, he was the one who was is mistrustful of Superman, but then he trusts him, and then yeah,
I think he had a lot of fun playing that role because he was definitely you know going for the fences.
yeah, he was. Yeah, and it, yeah, and a lot of the other characters too they're all voiced by like heavy hitting actors. I mean, you had like you mentioned Bradley Cooper, and then George Clooney voiced I think the spaceman.
Let's go back to our list here.
Yeah,
Yep, George Clooney. Although
yeah,
to be fair, he did once play a gay dog on South Park because that was the role they would give him. So
yeah, that's right.
um, you also got Jon Stewart, Matt Damon, uh,
Mhm.
Amy
And-
Schumer as an enormous gummy bear. Probably the finest performance I've ever seen from her.
oh yes,
But so this movie cost 100 million to make, and I believe that the ifs are a big chunk of that, between hiring a bunch of name actors and also having to CGI all of them.
yeah,
Now, I think that if I was going to, I mentioned at the start of the show that my title for the episode would be like, "If is for sad children, and that's okay."
yeah.
I said that and I mean it because it feels like it's designed to help children who have gone through some stuff to just kind of deal with it.
Yeah, yeah, you definitely get that sense. Especially, I don't know if I want a minor spoiler, but
Let's kind of put that a pin in that until we get to
okay,
a spoiler section.
okay, all right,
Because it is definitely about her getting back in touch with not just her imagination, but also with people in general. Because she's walled herself off. She associates creativity with her dead mom.
Mhm.
So just her opening up again.
Yeah,
Um, and of course, she has extra reason to wall herself off because she's worried that her dad's going to also die. So it's,
yeah,
and I think that the overall message of this movie for kids is, hey, bad things happen, but they don't always happen.
mhm.
And you can't just wall yourself off from everything.
Yeah, and I think that's a good message. Yeah.
Uh, it also feels like this movie is a bit therapeutic in the sense that there aren't really a lot of wild scenes.
No, there aren't. It's not. Yeah, usually with a movie like this, you're thinking it's going to be like Who Framed Roger Rabbit, where it's just goofy stuff all the time. But it never really gets goofy.
That
Uh,
might be why we liked the detective the best, is because he was the closest to that sort of character.
yeah, yeah,
Like if we take Steve Carell's character Blue from the picture here, he's a very calm and sedate character.
yeah.
Like he's just kind of generically friendly, kind of a little bit hapless,
Hmm.
but he's completely non-threatening.
Yeah,
Meanwhile, Phoebe Waller-Bridge's insect character, calm, soothing voice. Really, the only character who's upsetting at all for the kiddos is Ryan Reynolds himself. Because here's the thing: if I found out that behind the scenes Ryan Reynolds was a complete jerk and nobody actually liked working with him, I wouldn't be entirely surprised, because in movies like this and Rest in Peace Department, which we reviewed a few months back, he's
yeah,
always really good at just being an unlikable SOB.
yeah,
And, like he usually has this charm that he layers in with that jerkishness,
yeah,
but I think it's always there in every role. So either that's just the persona he's adopted, or he's doing what he knows. And Ryan, if by some weird chance you happen to see this, I'm not casting a judgment. I'm just saying that if in 20 years somebody writes the tell-all book, you're so good at portraying the types of characters you portray that I would not be entirely surprised.
yeah.
So, if you want to avoid that fate, maybe give your secretary the day off or something. I don't
Yeah.
know. All right.
Yeah.
So I think that the thing is that I think that if I was going to categorize this movie, it was a little bit on the slow side for us. I think we both agreed on that.
Yeah, I was. Yeah.
Um, but again, it's also if you have a child who's going through some stuff, quick, abrasive characters, really traumatic situations. Um, and this has a bunch of soothing, visually interesting scenes, is the way I'll put it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's also kind of I would say it's suitable for any kid who isn't going to start crying as soon as the mom dies in the first scene.
Yeah.
You also know it's a kid movie because they kind of say the subtext out loud at the end, with
Yeah.
just a kind of telling us B's character arc.
Yeah.
Now to talk about the actors for a second, outside of mildly slandering Ryan Reynolds, which I don't mean, but again, it's just the characters he plays.
Yeah.
Uh, B herself kind of carries this movie, and she is very good in it.
Yeah. Yeah. The actress who played her, I can't remember her name, Caitlin something.
Yeah, she was from The Walking Dead,
Yeah.
and I haven't ever watched The Walking Dead, but I think I've seen clips of her here and there, so she seemed vaguely familiar that way.
Yeah.
She was also young Rey in the Star Wars sequels, which we won't hold against her because
Yeah.
that character is blameless. And
Yeah.
um, all right. So non-spoiler thoughts. If you're a parent, I think I can recommend this to most children.
Yeah. I can.
Uh,
Yeah. I'd say so.
eh,
Yeah.
keep an eye on them in case they start getting a little bit antsy, but because I could see this falling flat with some people.
Yeah.
Which this movie wasn't a huge box office success, so and
Yeah.
again, it was released at a time when nobody was going to theaters this year, so like that dead zone after March that we've been reporting on so much.
Right. Yeah. And I don't remember, any real like marketing for this movie. I mean, I didn't really.
Yeah, the only marketing I can really remember from it, I, maybe I saw a trailer at the theater, but also they partnered with Baskin Robbins to give this thing an ice cream cone, so
Right. Yeah.
that cost them something.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I think I mean overall it's not a yeah it's a I'd say decent kids movie. My issues were basically with like we said before, with the pacing was really slow, and the parameters for how the imaginary friends are created and how they work wasn't really clearly defined. It was sort of like, like Toy Story, like how the toys come to life. Like, why do they come to life? And they come to life for different reasons, or is it? Yeah, it's not really clearly defined. Yeah, but
Yeah.
yeah.
And what throws even more weirdness onto it is the ending.
Mm,
So again, we are firmly in spoiler territories.
yes,
So earlier on, we didn't really mention this, but they kind of almost try to do their best to not be Foster's home for imaginary friends to avoid getting sued. I actually wouldn't be surprised if John Krasinski was working his way through the script and somebody on the staff went, "Oh no,
yeah,
John, what are we doing here? What are you talking about?" That show from Cartoon Network. I'm an adult who's been acting for 20 years. What are you talking about? Cartoon Network show.
yeah,
And then they had to change details, like because they make a stab in the middle at having a boy in the hospital adopt one of these friends, but he can't see anybody else's if imaginary friends. That's the name of the movie.
yeah, yeah.
That's the meaning of it. but
Yeah.
uh, it's like they can't just fob the friends off on other people, so
Yeah.
they decide to have people like have the ifs try to reconnect with their kids as adults, and like the
Which
kids can't
yeah.
really see them,
Yeah.
or the former kids can't really see them, but like just them being there fills them with like strength and courage or whatever they're missing.
Yeah. Which I will say that's probably the most clever part of it, because if you know a little bit about psychology, which I admit I don't know a lot about it, but I know like a smidge. Um, when kids have an imaginary friend, the imaginary friend is like an extension of their personality, or um, or it's who they would they imprint who they want to be onto that person, or onto the imaginary friend. So it kind of makes sense that the ifs can only be seen or felt by the people who imagine them. Um, yeah.
And the ifs we see do reflect the people who imagined them. Like Blue's guy, Blue is a big, affable, somewhat clumsy but well-meaning and confident guy.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, and who is his kid? Well, we don't know much about him, but he's clearly going in for some sort of big business meeting and is just feeling really unconfident.
Yeah, yeah, he's very nervous, and he's just yeah, and it's not really until like when he before he gets into the meeting that the Blue connects with him and says, "Oh, you got this," or something like that, or "It's gonna be okay," and then
Yep.
he all of a sudden he feels better.
Yep.
Um, yeah,
Meanwhile, Bee's grandmother, she imagined the Betty Boop insect character. Um, the grandma wanted to be a dancer, but she grew too tall for ballet, and so the insect is basically the extension of what she wanted to be.
yeah,
So it all lines up there. Now it occurs to me, I was about to say that it's unusual that B can see other people's imaginary friends,
yeah,
but earlier on, Blue is trying to force himself to get adopted by another little girl whose room he broke into,
right, yeah,
and she was able to see him. So that's kind of a little inconsistency,
yeah,
unless
and
she
there's
also has whatever gift B has.
yeah, and there's another inconsistency with that scene that we'll get to when we get to that part of the movie, when we talk about the ending. Um, but yeah, and then uh, so then as it progresses, then uh, the John Krasinski, the dad, he goes in for his heart surgery, and there's obviously some sort of complication with it, and so now she's really, B's really afraid that she's going to lose her dad too.
Yeah, and what you discover after he's okay. Spoiler alert: the
Yeah.
dad doesn't die. That's why I felt so confident recommending this movie for sad children.
Yes. Yeah.
Uh, you find out that Ryan Reynolds' clown character, who was a smaller part of the movie than I would have thought, was B's imaginary friend as who was a clown.
Yes. Yeah, and to go back to what I was saying before, when like Ryan Reynolds is in the girl's house with Blue, when he's trying to become the friend for the little girl, so one of the things Blue does is when he gets really nervous, he sneezes, and so he sneezed on Ryan Reynolds, and then he falls backwards, and it hits all of her toys, and then he hides under the bed. It's like, although if she could see Blue, then conceivably she could probably see him too. So that might be why he hid. But it's like, if he's imaginary, then you know why is he
Yeah,
hiding? Why is he hiding under the bed?
yeah. It's strange because through the movie, Ryan's character, like what the story arc they seem to be going on, is that Ryan has this is a human with the same gift as B, who
Yeah.
is feeling burnt out after all these years of taking care of these imaginary friends.
Yeah.
And she's there to rekindle, you know, uh, rekindle that love of helping and, and whatnot in him.
Yeah.
But if he's her imaginary friend, then he's just one of the inmates running the asylum,
Yeah.
which kind of takes away a little bit, in my opinion.
Yeah, I thought so too. And I will say I kind of figured it out pretty quickly, or not quickly, but once they, like the scene when she's trying to match the kid in the hospital up with one of the imaginary friends, and like
Hmm.
he's only talking to her. He never addresses Ryan Reynolds. So I was kind of like,
Okay.
oh, that's kind of when I kind of went, okay.
So you had a Sixth Sense kind of moment there where you went, wait a second, no one's actually talking with Bruce Willis here.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah. Um,
So I don't know that I'm as fond of that ending, but I think it's the type of twist ending that a kid would really enjoy because they wouldn't be breaking it down the same way we are.
yeah.
Wait a minute, would it thematically make more sense if he was just another human?
yeah.
Also, there's a mild inconsistency. Okay, Billy, you're not allowed to watch old Ebert reviews anymore.
Yeah.
You're turning into a killjoy.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say I think we kind of agreed it was like a C movie, but not like a hateful C movie. Just
Yeah.
for us as adults who don't necessarily need a bunch of whimsy injected into their lives, didn't really give us what we needed.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah, this is definitely for I would say, what do you say, 8 to, or well, 6 to
6 to 10, maybe.
6 to 10. Yeah, maybe 11. Yeah,
And also, it won't be an awful time for parents watching along with it because there is a lot of visual effects that are kind of interesting, and so it's very sweet. Its heart is definitely in the right place.
yeah, definitely. Yeah,
Well, I guess it's time to talk about our classic movie.
yes,
Daniel, the day when this movie graced your life was the most important day for you. But for me, it was Tuesday. That's right.
yes,
Street Fighter the movie.
yes.
So I had not seen this one. I'm just going to go ahead and close all my various if tabs here so we don't get distracted. So I had not seen this movie since I was in college because when I was in college, I was the treasurer for our school's video game club.
Mm,
And I had the idea, what if we just had bad video game movie night?
yeah,
Now, this being like 2006, 7 or so,
Yeah.
there weren't that many bad video game movies, but we had some fun with Uwe Boll and with, well, Street Fighter 2. Or excuse me,
yeah,
Street Fighter the movie, which is confusingly based more on Street Fighter 2 as a franchise because that was the one that actually was the cultural moment.
yes, yeah, and yes, Ninja. Yeah, one great bad movie. Um, Yeah, so for me, like I actually I didn't see it in the theater, but I did watch it a lot when it was out on video, and I think largely that was because it's basically a live action cartoon. Like it's
Yes.
the writing and the storytelling is kind of styled like a Saturday morning cartoon.
Yeah, I was trying to remember if I thought that this was okay. So you have things like The Room, where you have somebody sincerely trying to tell a story and just falling out of the trouble tree and hitting every branch on the way down.
yeah,
And so what was meant to be heartfelt turns out to be ridiculous.
yeah,
And I almost had it in my head that this movie was similar, but as I'm watching through it, I'm like, oh, okay, this is all like this is the director's vision right here on the screen.
yeah. Yeah. And speaking of the director, the writer and director is Stephen E. D'Souza, who he was one of the writers on Die Hard. He also wrote 48 Hours, and which we reviewed a few months back.
Okay.
Yeah, and he also wrote Commando with Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Okay. So the guy had a particular bent.
Yes, yeah. Uh, but yeah. So to get into the plot of the movie,
Such as it is.
such as it is, yeah. So the the movie kind of takes place in the fictional country of Shadaloo, which is I think it's probably supposed to be like Thailand or Cambodia or Vietnam, somewhere around in there.
Yeah, it's like it's that sort of Southeast Asian weird cultural mishmash that you can get because uh, even in the same country, because it's like I want to say it's something like 2/3 the world's commerce passes through there,
Yeah,
some crazy percent like that.
yeah. Um, yeah, a lot of stuff going through the South China Sea. Yeah, and the country is basically being run by General Bison, played in a scene-chewing performance by the late Raul Julia.
In possibly his greatest role, although he would probably punch me in the face if I were to call it that.
Yeah,
Yeah, from what I heard, he was strictly in this movie. I want to say so. He was dying,
Mhm.
and so he performed this movie in great pain, as I recall hearing.
Yeah,
And I believe he asked, like, I think he had some movies that he'd been offered, and he asked his kids which one he should pick, and they wanted him to do Street Fighter.
yeah,
Uh, he definitely elevates this movie.
yeah. Much like Frank Langella did with Masters of the Universe, when he played Skeletor in that movie. Um, Actually, this movie has a lot of commonalities with Masters of the Universe.
Yeah,
Now that I think about it.
because okay, so to take a step back, if you are somehow under a rock, or somehow have been under a rock, or you just don't do video games, Street Fighter, massively successful video game franchise,
Mhm.
has been for 30 plus years.
Yes.
Huge roster of characters, and you have the problem if you're adapting it into, like, if you're making it into a TV show. They had a really bad Saturday morning cartoon based on this, but it makes sense for a cast this large to give them a whole show to work with, because you can give each character their own episodes and subplots and everything.
Right. Yeah.
Uh, but just look at how many, like, all these characters are named characters from the games. You are not going to be able to do all of them justice in the context of a single hour and 40-minute movie.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and I remember your boy Zach. I think it was him. It was mentioned like the story of the movie almost felt like it could. It was like like the script was meant for like a live action GI Joe movie, and they just swapped out all the characters with Street Fighter characters.
Yeah, I'd buy that.
Yeah.
The only characters who I think would kind of struggle to be part of that would be Ken and Ryu, since I can't really think of any GI Joe characters who would fit that role of being kind of underworld shysters who were forcibly recruited.
Yeah. Yeah, the only ones I could think of would maybe be like Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow, but that wouldn't fit.
Yeah.
Uh, but
Again, this movie doesn't really fit what little lore there was for the characters in 1994 either. So
that's true. Yeah. But yeah, yeah. So yeah.
oh,
So
and Ninja points out the funny part is that the Shadaloo wasn't a country; it was the name of Bison's organization in the games. So it
yeah.
that's a nice way to repurpose that.
Hmm.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
so what's happened in the movie is that M. Bison has captured a whole bunch of people with this, not totally not the UN
Yeah.
peacekeeping organization. That, I mean, it's not the UN because they're not actually. You know what? I'm not going to make that joke because that would be inappropriate. No matter which of the various things that UN peacekeepers have done. Um, actually, you know what?
Yeah.
I can't even joke that they actually go into combat because quite often UN peacekeepers aren't allowed to directly intervene.
Nope.
So
Yeah.
I guess it makes sense that Guile is forced to go rogue
Yeah.
to make anything happen.
Yes. Yeah.
But he has kidnapped a whole bunch of these people, and he has given them 72 hours to give him $20 billion, which was even more money in those days.
Yeah. That was a good chunk of money. Yeah. Um, yeah. And so they're trying to, so Guile's trying to figure out how to get, like try to find out where Bison's base is and rescue the hostages. And one of the hostages is Guile's buddy, Carlos Charlie. Um, and
Blanca.
Blanca, yeah, he's Blanca. So Bison decides to use him for his genetic experiments. And but Guile's trying to find out how to do that, and then the ninja says, "I don't remember Akuma."
No, he is not.
No, he's
This,
not in there.
I believe this predates Akuma being in the games.
Yeah. So then in another part of Shadaloo, you had Sagat, who's running his little underground fighting, uh, drugs and guns,
Crime emporium is almost what you'd call it, because it's like,
yeah.
do you want women? Do you want underground cage fights? Do you want drugs and guns? Come on down to Sagat's General Crime Emporium.
Yeah. Yeah, and of course Vega is his prize fighter, and it's also where we met, as DB alluded to earlier, Ken and Ryu, who are basically a couple of low-level con artist type guys who are trying to scam Sagat, but it doesn't. But Sagat's onto him, and then he tries to put
all the weapons are fake, and like they shoot ping pong balls, and they actually have this movie has some pretty inspired fight scenes.
Yeah, which is pretty amazing considering they really didn't have a whole lot of time to train them in the fight choreography, from what I've heard. So it's pretty good accomplishment there. Yeah.
But like you have a scene where um, Ryu and Ken are fighting off Sagat's goons, who are mostly unarmed, but one of them at one point picks up a gun and forgets it was one of the ping pong guns.
Yeah, shoots Ken right in the forehead. Yeah.
Okay, so plot threads, I would say we have. So we have the Ken Ryu thing where they end up getting picked up by the UN forces and immediately thrown into prison with Sagat because they have a 72-hour clock, and they, I suppose in a country like Shadaloo, they don't exactly have much in the way of due process. It's like, well, we caught you at the crime emporium, to prison you go.
Yeah. There was a curfew, and
That's right. They were caught out after the curfew.
Yeah, and if you violated the curfew, you would, if you resisted, you would get shot. I remember hearing that in the PA.
So this is where Guile decides to recruit them to get on Sagat's good side, help him break out of prison, and which will, in theory, lead them right to M. Bison.
Yes. So they stage a breakout, and then Ken shoots Guile, but Guile's wearing one of those like squib things. Yeah. So they faked his death, and reporting on that, of course, you have Chun-Li.
One of the other movie threads.
Yes. So Chun-Li's a reporter, but she's obviously got other skills than that. So do the two members of her news crew, which are Hondo and Balrog. It's interesting they made Balrog a good guy because he's not a good guy in the games.
There really wasn't room for another bad guy. They kind of already had the who's the guy in the top right here?
DJ.
They kind of had DJ being the role, like the role that you would have given Balrog, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
he barely got anything to do as it was.
yeah, except for a couple of like quippy one-liners here and there. Um, yeah, and of course, what got me was the guy who played Zangief had I think a lot of the comedy. Uh,
Like, there's one scene where a bus is about to run into the crime emporium,
yeah,
and they see it on the TV screen because that was like a bomb. There's like an explosion that Chun Li had planted,
yeah,
and as
yeah,
it's getting close, he goes, "Quick, change the channel."
yeah,
That's going to stop it from running into them.
yeah, yeah. They all look at him like, "What?"
I think that was the exact moment where I said, "Oh, this isn't an accidental comedy. This is a farce on purpose." Okay.
Yeah, yeah, and so yeah, so then you got so Kennen, yeah, Kennen, yeah. So Chun Li tries to kill Bison and Zagat, and it doesn't work, and then Ken and Ryu basically sell Chun Li out, and Hondo and Balrog. So that now they're all at Bison's headquarters, and Guile has a plan to take on the base by sea, but Bison's got this really sophisticated radar, so they have this stealth boat that they use instead, which very early '90s, mid '90s CGI.
Yeah. Um, I will say the scene where Guile decides to just, damn the torpedoes, and I don't care that we've been told to stand down. We're going to, we're going to launch our invasion.
Yeah,
That had a pretty decent scene. But it's like, Bison's an awful monster who's kidnapped our friends, but we've been told to stand down. And I think
yeah,
so, something to that effect was like just his repeated refrain, but we've been
yeah,
told to stand down.
yeah,
It just whips his men into a frenzy and they launch their attack.
yeah,
Um, so this movie is very quotable.
mhm,
Earlier on, I did for me, it was a Tuesday.
yeah,
Bison is just like a really good Saturday morning cartoon villain, arguably better than this than his actual Saturday morning cartoon,
yeah,
because Raul is bringing it all, or
yeah,
bringing his all. Meanwhile, Guile, poof,
yeah.
I've never been a Van Damme guy, man.
Uh,
It,
yeah,
Guile is jacked, but he can't act.
no,
At least
yeah,
not in this movie.
no, yeah, Van Damme was I would say probably the weakest part of this movie. Now, from what I've heard, he was doing a lot of nose candy during the making of the movie, and he and Kylie Minogue, who played Cammy in the movie, were meeting in his trailer, between scenes, if you know what I mean.
Gasp.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. As I mean, unfortunately for everybody else in the cast,
yeah,
Raul Julia kind of casts a long shadow over the movie, so
yeah. He does.
nobody else really has a chance to stand out. Most other people are just kind of competent and they get a couple of good one-liners.
Yeah. Well, like you were saying, I mean, this, the roster of Street Fighter is just so huge that it's when you put them all in a movie like this, it's hard to give them give everybody something to do. It's a bit like X-Men,
Hmm.
where you have such a large roster, and it's you're basically only focusing on like two characters, and the rest of them are almost like background.
Yeah, which eh, uh, I think that kind of, how to put it, while I'm sure that there are probably some Street Fighter purists, especially ones who came to the franchise later when more lore had a chance to build up,
Mhm.
who might take offense to this movie. I think that when you have such a bloated cast of colorful characters who, by the end of it, by and large, are their video game counterparts, costume and all,
Yeah.
uh, it's like that's not a bad approach to just kind of embrace the silliness.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, and You'll have a much more enjoyable experience if you do it that way, as opposed to just like, oh, this is so dumb. Why are we
Because
embrace the
it's dumb on
silliness?
purpose. Just relax.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and of course, my favorite scene in the movie it was when Bison and Zagat are making their business deal, and Bison pays Zagat with the Bison dollars.
Uh, uh, it's going to have an exchange rate of $1 bison per 5 British pounds.
And
How will that happen? It's the exchange rate I'll negotiate with them when I kidnap the queen.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I love that. I love that part. It's just like because it shows the delusion of Bison that it's like, oh, I already have currency with my face on it. Yeah, it's not worth anything now, but later
Someday.
on it's going to be. Yeah,
Yeah, and the thing with him is that he's at once a ridiculous madman, but at the same time, you almost believe that with this crazy world he's living in, he could pull it off. Because the
yeah,
UN was willing to give him $20 billion, which would be a hell of a jumpstart for a fledgling country's economy.
yeah. It would. Yeah,
Although we know that from real life experience that it would have all just gone to lavish palaces and military upgrades and things like that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It would not have benefited the people in any way whatsoever.
Yeah. Yeah, Ninja says it right. Bison is a crypto bro. And the
Yeah,
90s equivalent, yeah, make your own currency, pump and dump.
yeah,
But there are also a few adult jokes that I didn't catch the first time around. Like
yeah.
the scene where Hondo and Balrog are in prison together and they're trying to escape. Balrog, or who said it to who?
It was Balrog. Yeah.
That's right. Balrog goes, "Hey, help me out." And
No, he
Hondo
says,
says,
give me a hand."
"Give me a hand." And Hondo
Uh,
just looks him over and says, "We've been in prison for 2 hours. Talk to me in a month." I
yeah,
missed that the first time I watched it.
yeah, yeah. That line as a kid. Zoom.
Yep.
Oh
Uh,
man.
Now, amusing things in the movie. Besides that, they did definitely tease a second movie that didn't happen.
Hmm.
Which this movie was reasonably successful. Like it was a very expensive movie, but uh, it did pretty decently in the total national and international box office.
Yeah.
Also, I recall or a snippet of an interview where someone from Capcom was asked how they felt about the movie underperforming, and he said, "What are you talking about? Every time it's on TV, we make $1.5 million.
Yeah.
This got a lot of play on cable back in the day."
Yeah. It did. Yeah. And of course, you also had the video sales and video rental sales. So I mean,
Yep.
mm,
Yeah, this was a cash cow.
yeah,
Probably funded a lot of classic Capcom video games.
yeah, yeah. It probably didn't get a sequel largely because of Raul Julia's passing. That
Right.
might have had something to do with it.
Also, kind of a large, unwieldy cast of varying levels of fame.
That's true. Yeah.
Now, what's funny is that we were talking about how hard it was to make a movie with such a bloated cast. So, like 10-ish years later, they said, okay, we'll just make a Street Fighter movie focused on one character as the point of view character. And we'll pick a character that everybody likes, Chun-Li, and it'll be a great movie. And that one is just a bad, bad movie. I've watched it. It's
That movie's horrible.
imminently
Yeah,
forgettable.
yeah, it is. Well, when you cast Lana Lang from Smallville to play Chun Li,
Oh
yeah,
no, did they? Oh
yeah, yeah,
no. Oh, that's
yeah.
right. There was like the flap at the time because as a child she looked much more Chinese than the actual than like the actress who they had as her adult counterpart.
Right, yeah,
Oh, yeah. No,
yeah,
no, this movie is worth a watch. Now,
yeah.
I will say my second go around, I wasn't as entertained as my first go around 20 years ago. But part of that is the first time I watched it in the perfect environment. A bunch of friends who were just there to take the piss out of a bad movie and eat snacks. And there wasn't alcohol served, but that might for people who partake in such things rather than sucking down Diet Cokes when it gets hot.
Yeah.
That might be a way to enhance the proceedings.
Yes. Yeah. It definitely helped me when I was rewatching it.
Uh, I'll also say that because we did because we picked our review topics so late in the week and I was kind of busy, there are times when we're watching stuff for review where I have plenty of time to absorb it, and then there's this week where I was kind of playing catch up. So that
Yeah.
when the movie feels like homework, that always hurts my enjoyment of it a bit.
Yeah.
But it is objectively one of the best bad movies of all time.
Indeed. Yes.
The other funny thing is, and this was pointed out by the podcast "How Did This Get Made" back in the day, they never actually define what a Street Fighter is in the movie.
No, they don't.
Because when you think about it, okay, in the context of the video game, bunch of one-on-one, matches, usually out on the street rather than being indoors,
Mhm.
perfect sense.
Yeah.
In this one, this is more like a military operation, like a paramilitary operation than a street fight.
Yeah.
And the last fight happens in M. Bison's fortress. I don't think there's. I guess unless you count the Crime Emporium, which was partially outdoors, as being a street fight.
Yeah. 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 If you want an actual like street fighter adaptation that has like street fights, there was an anime of Street Fighter 2 that was uh
Oh, hi, Art by Florence.
oh hi. Yes, Florence, by the way, did all of our art here.
Oh, nice.
Yes. But the anime Street Fighter 2 has a lot of street fighting in it.
Yeah. There's also one gag I just have to share that I loved. They're at this bazaar where they're selling various secondhand weapons. Like, the new Iraqi tank, 5 speeds, 2 forward, 3 reverse.
Oh yeah. The helicopter from the U.S. Embassy in Saigon.
Only flown once.
Yeah.
But this is a silly, irreverent movie, and it's worth a watch.
Yes, it is. Yeah. Well, I think we've said all we need to say for this week.
Indeed. Now, next week we should be able to return at our normal time again.
Yes.
And we may have already selected our classic movie, which answers the question, should you suck HUDs directly or by proxy?
Okay. Yeah.
If that makes no sense, it might make more sense next week.
Indeed, yes. Well, thank you for everybody for tuning in. We appreciate it as always. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Hit the bell, all that good stuff. And
also, if you didn't see it last week, Daniel posted our review for 1917 earlier today, so give that a watch too.
Yes, indeed. And we'll see you all next week. Bye, everybody.
Yep. Night, everybody.
Daniel Parker presents from the team that brought you Angels Awakening. After 100 years, Henry Hatcher is awoken to fight his mortal enemy. But he is not alone. Guardian Angel.